All right, y'all, I have discovered something, run upon it in my investigatory means during this hellacious torture that is right before launch, okay? This is going to change the way you theory craft and way you build builds in Diablo 4. Let's go check it out. What'd you find this time, Hawg? I know that's what everybody's thinking, but just bear with me for just a few minutes. Give me a chance. Let me tell you what I found. I think this might really change the way that you look at how you build your builds, especially for group play, and it might actually convince some of you solo only guys to actually give group play a try. So I was going back through some old footage because Hawg ain't privileged enough or popular or cool enough to get access to the early game like everybody else has been talking about. So I just have to be a pleb and look through old footage. But doing that, because I'm a kind of a support nerd, I like to see exactly how enemies take damage. I like to slow things down and map out a plan and see if there's any way that, you could be a little bit more efficient in supporting a party. Because Hog's in the high chair a lot of times. I mean, my buddy EB, he probably looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger right now from toting Hog around in the high chair. But I like to try to contribute, so I try to like to figure out ways to be a support or contribute or deal damage, whatever it is. So I started looking at old footage and I noticed something about vulnerable in particular. So I've got stone cold evidence on vulnerable, but the theory behind it is if it works for vulnerable, if it's proven to work for vulnerable, then it works for the rest of the statuses. Okay, let me show you what I mean. All right, so the way I'm going to visualize it to y'all is on a switchboard analogy. Okay, it's the best way that I could come up with. I've been banging my head against the wall all morning trying to figure out the best way to visualize it, and this is it. So if you have been building your builds based on the bucket theory, okay, you're going to want to pay attention to this. This is going to make your bucket theory a little bit easier to visualize and stronger because you're going to start building towards a group, okay? Now, what's the secret? Let me show you. Vulnerable, which is my personal all-time favorite right now. I think it is the number one status that every monster should be under at all times. I feel like every group should have somebody there that can make sure all these monsters are vulnerable just about at all times, if not pretty close to it. Vulnerable monsters take 20% more damage from all sources. You want that at all times, regardless of level, world tier, or anything, okay? Going through my footage, we've got this right here from the beta. Gonna step forward a couple frames. You would never notice this in gameplay because it happens so fast. But if we slow it down frame by frame, you can see. So here I am attacking. He attacks this. Now, at this stage, these two characters, myself and EB, we do not have any abilities that grant vulnerability. So here he comes. We're attacking here. We don't have vulnerability. Boom. You see vulnerable on my screen, even though I didn't attack. That means that monster is vulnerable for everybody. So even though you didn't attack him, now whatever abilities in the buckets that you have to vulnerable ability or vulnerable monster, it's available now. It's ready. You can use it. It's procced because that monster is vulnerable. Do you understand? Now, there's also things in the world that can do this also. Okay? Here's an example. This blood boil. So, there's a monster behind me. You see he's stabbing me. There's this blood boil right here that's about to explode. Watch what happens. Vulnerable. Not only does that make me vulnerable, it makes the enemy I'm fighting vulnerable. So, anything that deals damage in this game can change your or the enemy's status. That is pretty cool to me. You might not give a shit, but to me right there, that could be a strategy used in in-game. If you need to get everything vulnerable and you're on cooldown, and you know there's these blisters because you know there's going to be other things in the world that will do this similar effect. Now, we know for sure, positive, we see it right here. that it does it with vulnerability. The question that I have, based on this, does it do the same for everything else? Burning, poison. Now, we know just about it does it for poison because we've seen it on the world boss. So what this means is, in theory, okay, it's almost fact, we'll figure it out for sure when the game comes out, but in theory, anything that deals damage, player, monster, piece of environment, anything, can change status. If this blood blister procs vulnerable on this enemy, I can benefit from it. And the proof's in the pudding. You would not see vulnerable pop up on your screen if it wasn't actually vulnerable. That doesn't make any sense, right? So don't come at me with that argument. It says vulnerable right there. So use this to your advantage, use it to your theory craft, but I want to show you how it actually works in a group. So let's go back to the switchboard. All right, we're going to do a couple exercises to demonstrate what I mean. You have to see what I'm talking about to fully grasp what I mean by status changes. And then you'll see how this actually pairs with your buckets and really helps you make just crazy damage once you understand how this is. Then you can start theory crafting for actual groups that mesh together for the end game. Okay? So look, single player rogue, single elite. The view of the board here is the elite's status. Okay? So he's healthy, he's an elite, let's say he's fortified. We have not attacked him yet. Okay? Coming up on him, right? We've aggroed him. Distant. You can check distant this way because either way it doesn't matter. If you look at it from the monster's point of view, as you're the enemy, he's got an enemy that's distant because some of these monsters are going to do more damage to close players than distant players. And you can also look at this through the monster status, right? You're close to the monster, you're distant from the monster. It's interchangeable, it does not matter, okay? But there are damage, you can do damage to close enemies, damage to distant enemies, so that's why these are here. That is a status, you can deal damage to it. All of these relate to that board, okay? Helps you map out battle. This is literally mapping the battle. So as you're closing that gap, no longer distant, close, okay? You're up on him. Start hitting him, okay? First attack is poison imbued. Now he's poisoned, okay? It's the first attack. Because that poison also makes him slow, hypothetical situation to demonstrate mapping of the battle, it's also slowed. So you see what's going on here. But now, say a second's gone by, and that poison damage is pretty intense. He's no longer fortified or healthy. Okay? Rogue attacks again. Nothing procs. It's just a regular attack. Okay? The next attack finally hits a vulnerable. So now the monster is vulnerable. Okay? Hits another attack. The monster out of nowhere starts attacking pretty fast. Okay? That monster is under acceleration. And I know nobody has seen this anywhere. And it, again, looking back through the footage, it popped up when I was running Druid. And it was after I had gained an attack speed bonus. It popped up right over my bar, my toolbar, and it said, under acceleration. Okay. So that's here. That's going to be attack speed, movement speed. Your character is currently under acceleration. Okay. So the elites got an attack speed bonus right now. Cool. Still vulnerable. Still poisoned. You got to keep in mind your times on this. Okay. And how long it's going to take you to perform an attack while he's under these status changes. So anyway, that's good. He's poisoned. Poison finally runs out. He drops his acceleration. He's done. Now he's injured, below 35%. And then he dies. Okay? You get the picture. Now, that takes a little bit. That's single player. So if you wonder why it's a little slower as a single player, that's why. Because the flow of battle is a little bit slower between those status changes. Okay? Because we know with the buckets that you need to multiply a bunch of buckets together to get big damage. The same thing, the same principle goes with status changes. If you're not changing their status a lot, they're not going to take a lot of damage. They're not going to die real fast. Okay? Here comes the group. Here comes the reason why you should play in a group. Okay? Because we know that their status change doesn't matter who did it for them to take damage from that particular status, a group can be devastating. All right, so we a group. Highly efficient, highly trained A team. No one's left behind. The most efficient group does not separate. Run together. If somebody's a little bit slower, if you got a druid or bigger people in your party, just slow down. There's no reason to dive ahead. You're not going to get loot before somebody. The group is more efficient, more powerful together. It's always better than trying to come up and play clean up and when monsters are all over the place and it's just a sloppy sandwich, okay? So we've got running up. Druid's going to hit his skill that gives everybody vulnerable or whatever. Doesn't have to be Druid. Whatever player is going to make the mob vulnerable needs to do that. In this case, to me, it'd be Druid with Ravens. They're vulnerable. Boom. Okay? Immediately after that happens, you're going to hit Vine Creeper. Make him immobilized, poisoned. Okay? Boom, boom. At the same time, because we up on this mob, we check close. Okay? This is just Druid. Now don't forget your extras that happen. That enemy's poison is also slowed because you've got extra stuff. Okay? Here comes Barbarian. He starts slashing and gashing everything in there, cutting that ass up. Now they're bleeding. Okay? I'm talking about, this all happens at the same time. Initial attack. Well, here comes Sorceress. Okay? Drops a meteor. Now they're all burning. Yes, all of these status changes do happen. There's no waiting list. There's no waiting room for one to expire before another one does it. Okay? These all happen at once. If you still don't believe me, you need to go watch the developer live stream where he was talking about you don't need to be, you could be a level 11 and have a level 20 and you're both still doing damage. You're both contributing. No one's really getting carried. It's the way that the game's designed, the scaling. It's way more than I understand, but I do understand this, the simple changes of status, and that is happening. Rogue comes in, does their thing, whatever they're imbuing with, chilled. Okay, let's do chilled for this example. They're cold imbued and they start doing their thing, chilled. Look at the statuses on the first attack, first second, versus what we saw with single player. And the proof's in the pudding. You have a lot more status changes this quick. So you can really deal a lot more damage in a group, obviously. But if you plan on who does what, who's going to provide what, who's going to make what enemy change status to what, then you can really start dealing some stupid damage, I think. And this might just be elementary school for y'all. It might not be that big of a deal. But I'm going to use it to my advantage, especially when applying. If the only thing that you take out of this is that vulnerable can be applied by anybody and taken advantage of, that's the main thing to take out of this. That is 100% fact, unless they change it when the game comes out, and then I just ain't worth shooting. But there you go. Like I said, let me know if you want to play around with this thing. I mean, you can literally just sit here if you want to go super nerd. I mean, you can just say, oh, okay, well, after 3 seconds, they're not going to be vulnerable anymore, but the poison damage is still going to be there. The burning's still going to be there. And after after Billy's burning damage runs out, then we can cast trap, and that will keep the poison damage going, and then the sorceress can come in and freeze, and the mobilize wears off, the slow wears off, but then they're stunned from that. Like, you can really, really play with it. You know, the possibilities are endless. But anyway, I appreciate y'all just listening to me ramble. If you need a community to run with the House of Hawg, we ain't mild, we wild. Links in the description below. And unfortunately, you know, I'm just not cool enough to get on the Twitch list or anything. But if you wanna watch me for whatever reason, and because you don't want cosmetics or whatever, Twitch TV /Hawg Gaming, Hawg _gaming, right? Appreciate y'all, and we'll see you next time.